In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create an R2 data catalog enabled bucket and then how to interact with that catalog and Iceberg tables through PyIceberg and a couple different query engines. So to start off in the Cloudflare UI, in the R2 object storage section, I'll go ahead and create a fresh bucket, and I'll just call this my lake house and create that bucket. Next, in the settings tab for the bucket, I'll scroll on down and enable R2 data catalog. And now while I'm here, I want to grab this catalog URI and warehouse name. First, I will copy the URI and then switch over to my Jupyter notebook. This is where I am running PyIceberg, and I'll go through this just in a minute here. I'll paste in the URI and then go back and grab the warehouse name as well and save that in my notebook. And then last thing I'll need to do in the Cloudflare UI is generate an API token. So I'll go back to the main R2 section. I will go to manage API tokens, and I'll create a new account API token and just have to make sure that this is an admin read and write token. And I'll create the token and then copy the token value. And now I can go back into my Jupyter notebook and paste that in, and we are ready to go. So when using PyIceberg and kind of dependencies for this specific demo, you'll want to pip install a few different packages. So we have PyArrow, which we'll use to load some data into an Iceberg table. We have PyIceberg, which is the main library for connecting to the catalog. And then DuckDB and Polars are the two query engines that I will show as well. Once we have those pip installed in our Python file or notebook, we can import our dependencies. So here we'll just import PyArrow and then the REST catalog from PyIceberg. Here we have our connection details, which I have copied over from our previous steps in the Cloudflare UI. And then we can connect to the catalog and get a catalog object that we can interact with. So I'll use that REST catalog from PyIceberg. I'll give it a name and then specify those connection details. And let me just run this notebook really quickly before I forget. After we have our catalog, we can then create a namespace. So I'll create a namespace called default. You just need to do this once, but since we have a fresh bucket and catalog, there's no namespaces yet. This default namespace is where our Iceberg tables will live. Now that we have a namespace, we can then load some Iceberg tables into it. So first, I'll just create a super simple arrow table with some data that will load into Iceberg. And then once we have that arrow table, we can then create an Iceberg table to load the data into. So with this create table method, we will specify the identifier for the table. This is that default namespace, and then people will be the name of our table. And then secondly, we have to specify the schema for the table. And so this is just the schema for the arrow table that we defined above. Once we have that table created, we can then append the data from our arrow table, and that will write the data into our brand new Iceberg table. And so after running that, we now have a Iceberg table with the data stored in R2, and we can use various query engines to read and manipulate the data. First off, we'll use DuckDB. So we'll just scan the table and create a DuckDB connection with it. And then we can write any kind of SQL that we want. So here we just have a simple select star, and we will read all of the data from our table. And then just the example of using another query engine. Here we have Polars. We'll create a lazy frame from our Iceberg table and then just get all of the data as well. So we'll print that out here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. As you can see, it's super simple to create an R2 data catalog enabled bucket and to get started loading data and querying the data with various engines.